from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
A battle of the undefeated, injuries, coaches on the hot seat, and a rough play situation for a Roughrider that has everyone talking. This is the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Thank you for choosing us here on the Ticats Audio Network. This week, two brilliant co-hosts join me from TSN 1260. He covers the Elks, the Oilers, and everything that's Edmonton. Say hello there, Jason Gregor.
How you doing?
And this fella, alongside his colleagues at TSN 1200 in Ottawa, I put together maybe one of the best post-game shows I have ever heard. I don't care, Raptors, Blue Jays, it didn't really matter. He is the voice of the Redblacks, AJ Jakubec.
Thanks, Bubs. Yeah, it was a bit of it didn't really seem like it was going to be that type of post-game show at 28-13 with about 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, but things escalated in a hurry.
Hey, they certainly did. Right down to the phone calls. It was spectacular radio, Let's get right down to business, fellas. Hey, the CFL are investigating Friday night's ejection of Roughrider defensive tackle Garrett Marino for a late hit on Roughriders quarterback Jeremiah Masoli, and his actions while walking off the field, well, for some, they are epic. I'll go right to the source, AJ. How should the league proceed? As the time of we are taping this right now, we have not heard any type of discipline or any word from the CFL other than they are investigating the situation.
I'm a big believer in second chances, but I think this should be a really, really harsh punishment. I think if you just look at the hit itself, it's brutal. To me, I think he meant to do it. I can't get in Garrett Marino's head, but it certainly looked like he meant to do it. He's got the history. He certainly went after, and you can talk about Dino Boyd's situation in this as well, because, he probably deserves some supplemental discipline as well for, what looked like a pretty dirty hit on Pete Robertson. So, but let's separate that. He goes after Boyd. There's the allegations the night before that he basically said he was going to do something like this the night before at the keg. There's allegations of racism here. There's the hit itself. And then what I thought was probably worse than anything was just how he reacted going off the field. To me, I've been trying to think of a comparable because it's not just one play. It's not just one incident. It's the whole of it. It kind of reminds me a little bit, and there's no apples-to-apples comparison, but it reminds me of what Jeff Kugel did when he was a member of the Windsor Spitfires, where all of it just brought the league into disrepute. Is this the type of player that you want representing your league? When you go off the field flexing and cheering and celebrating the fact that you injured a player. You seriously injured a player. It's not like he didn't know what he had done. So, look, I'm all for second chances. I'm not going to say, kicked out of the league forever, but I think they need to take a real serious stand. Kick him out for the year. There are second chances. Jacob Ruby, you know what? He made some mistakes last year as a member of the Edmonton Elks. He paid for it. He ended up missing the entire season. Now he's getting a second opportunity. But I just don't think this is a player that they should be keeping around for this season based on the whole of it. And I don't want to hear about what about this, what about Simone Lawrence, what about Khari Jones. I didn't see Simone Lawrence or Khari Jones celebrate the fact that they injured a player to the same degree that Garrett Marino did. And that, to me, was the most sickening and disgusting part of all of it.
Jason, just with all due respect to AJ, he's close to the situation. He is part of the Redblacks broadcast. And he's obviously going to be very sensitive, as we've heard. He's fired up, which is great. You're coming from more of a neutral standpoint. Let me hear your thoughts on what you saw and what you think the CFL should do in this situation.
Well, the CFL has to suspend him. I don't think that's any debate at all. It's going to come down to how long of a suspension. You know what? It's probably going to be difficult to, conversations at the keg or anything like that. That's probably going to be a he said type of scenario, so they'll have to do an investigation. I don't know how thorough that's going to be. So, the thing that we can discuss for sure is the hit itself. The hit itself is pretty gross. I've seen a lot of overzealous celebrations. That happens all the time. I don't agree with the suggestion that he should be, Saskatchewan should just cut him. I'm not a big believer in cancel culture. It's a terrible decision he made. But if you're not going to, it's like a kid. If you don't discipline your kid and then your kid acts out all the time, I don't blame the kid, right? Now, he's a grown man. The league has to come down. I would think a fair suspension, 6 games. That's pretty significant to me. That's a third of the season. And, that's a lot of opportunity for him to decide if he wants to come back and play. Like, we've seen guys like to me, he reminds me of Jeff Braswell. I don't know if you guys remember Braswell or not. He was cocky, he was arrogant, had a lot of cheap hits. And eventually he played himself out of the league because he couldn't figure out how to play. Now, if you go back, and I saw online, he was suspended in college. So this is not the first time. He's had some other questionable hits. So to me, the CFL can't dip their toe in the suspension water and be like, okay, 2 games. I'm sorry, 6-game suspension is pretty significant. Maybe they go longer. Maybe they want to go 9. I'm not sure if I look at precedent. Like Jacob Ruby's completely different. That was off the field. That was falsifying a COVID thing. That's a completely different action. So I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. So I would look at just based on dirty, cheap hits and what guys have done in the CFL, 6 to 9 games would be a pretty significant suspension based on that. And I think it would be warranted.
I thought it was interesting, the response I got on Twitter there, Jason, and both of you, AJ, here, is the fact that a lot of Saskatchewan Roughrider fans piped up on Twitter and saying that they don't want that player as a representative of the team that they follow. So, Jason, that's where I think maybe where you're looking at the Roughriders. And, of course, they've got to win football games. And Marino's there as a starter for obvious reasons. He's probably a pretty good ball player, and he certainly disrupts things in the middle. I mean, AJ, does this team, this franchise, have to take a look at what kind of damage keeping him could do?
Yeah, and just I'm not using Jacob Ruby as a comparison in terms of what the suspension should be. I'm actually using Jacob Ruby as a comparison to say he made a mistake. I don't want to see him banned for life from the Canadian Football League. I'm using that as a comparison to say this is a guy that at some point, should be able to redeem himself and get a second chance. I just don't think it should be this year. So just to be clear on that point, I get it. It's not an apples to apples comparison. In terms of what Saskatchewan can do, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want that guy on my football team. Here's the thing. I try to listen to players when it comes to this. There's 2 sides of it. There's the endangering other players in the league part of it, and then there's bringing the CFL into disrepute part of it. And when it comes to the first part, I try to listen to players. It's funny, we had some pretty good debates on our radio station. We've had some pretty good players that have helped us on our broadcast, ex-players, Mitch White being one of them. I remember Mitch White talking about Simone Lawrence and Zach Collaros, and there are some ex-players that were taking Simone Lawrence's side on that and saying, look, it's a bang-bang play and that sort of thing. Find me some players, ex-players, current players, whatever, that had nothing to do with that game. Find me some that were taking Garrett Marino's side. And so when you hear players like Trevor Harris, who won't even mention him by name, the players in the league don't want to play against a guy like that. And quite frankly, if you're a member of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, if that happens, it's going to put a target on some of your players as well. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell the Saskatchewan Roughriders what to do. That's up to them what they want to do. But I know what the CFL should do. 6-9 games, you know what? It wouldn't. I'd like to see them done for the year. I would. 2 or 3 or 4 would seem like a slap on the wrist to me. And again, it's not just about the hit. The hit itself, that's probably worth 2, 3, 4 games in itself. But it's bringing the Canadian Football League into disrepute. And there's some players that have had overzealous celebrations in the past for sure. But this is a player that you knew that you injured. He's down on the field, and you're going across the sideline, flexing with your helmet in the air the entire time. I also think, I get what Saskatchewan did and not making him available after the fact. Maybe if he has a tearful apology after the fact, But he certainly didn't seem like a guy that all of a sudden was going to have a tearful apology until he realized that, oh, maybe this is going to hurt a game check for me. So I don't know. Like, to me, suspend him for the year, deal with it later. If he wants to come back, if he wants to redeem himself after that, that's great. But I don't think you can put this on the Saskatchewan Roughriders. This is the CFL that has to step up and make a pretty tough decision here.
Guys, we hear a lot about this in the National Hockey League. Jason, should the length of injury time that Masoli sets out, which were reported at TSN's hearing at about 10 to 12 weeks possible, should the length of the injury have anything to do with the length of the suspension, Jason?
No, because what if you cheap shot a guy and he luckily doesn't get hurt? The cheap shot is just as malicious, and the guy, you're lucky he doesn't get hurt. I've never really bought into that because – sometimes we've seen plays where, a guy can tear up his knee and it's not even a dangerous play and the guy's out for the year. So I've never been one to want to match that. I understand the rationale behind it, but however, the minute you set that precedent, what if, let's say, he does this exact hit and Masoli's out a week? Then he's only getting a 1-game suspension? People would freak out. Like, the hit in itself, the action, and AJ's right about the post-game or the post-hit celebration, right? None of it looks good. But if Masoli somehow would have magically only been injured 1 game or 2 games, I don't think anybody would be like, well, now he only gets a 2-game suspension. So I think that people only think about that when it's a long-term suspension. They don't think about the times when you make a cheap shot, there's no injury, and then the guy's going to get off. So no, I wouldn't put that into play.
Last one to you here there, AJ. There was I guess what I would say is a very spirited one-way conversation between both head coaches in La Police and Dickinson at the end of the game. I don't know if you've talked to Coach La Police since. I mean, do you know what was said there? It did seem very one-way.
It had to do with, it obviously had to do with the incident itself. I don't know exactly what the words were, but it was quite spirited across the field too. Bob Dice, who's a pretty passionate guy and the special teams coach of the Redblacks, was yelling at Craig Dickinson as well. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of emotions. It reminds me actually of 2015 a little bit. Simone Lawrence with a low hit on Henry Burris, and Jason Moss looked like he was ready to come and fight Simone himself from the sideline. So that, people are going to get heated. I don't think that's going to carry over. The other thing that I'd like to say on this is, obviously I know Jeremiah. I've got to know him a little bit over the course of, training camp and the start of the season. And I feel for him. I feel for his family, and especially someone that has come off some serious injuries here. So there's that part of it. But, let's be honest, Ottawa's done with Saskatchewan. It's not like for a team that's 0-4, right, that probably needs – A, to get their own house in order, but B, to get help. A suspension, like the longer he's suspended, the less it benefits the Ottawa Redblacks, right? I mean, let's be honest, they don't play them anymore. So this is not about what's going to benefit the Ottawa Redblacks or anything like that. This is, my position completely is about what's good for the Canadian Football League. And I'd say the same thing if I saw somebody else do this in a game that Ottawa wasn't involved. To me, this is just a bad look on the Canadian Football League. The only people I've heard defending him, and that's fair. They're fair to defend him. I'm not going to crap on these people that have defended him, but the only people that have defended him are in Saskatchewan or are Roughriders fans. I've yet to hear anybody, whether it's a pundit, prognosticator, an ex-player, current player, whatever, say that doesn't have some sort of tie to Saskatchewan, hey, you know what? You have to look at it from this way. And again, I've heard that in other instances in past incidents, most notably involving Simone Lawrence. So to me, it's kind of indefensible what he did. And again, the whole of it. And that's why I'm glad that they're taking the time here. I'm glad that they're taking the time to investigate the whole of it, right? The allegations of racism, the allegations at the keg the night before. There's a lot that goes into this. And, if he gets the book thrown at him, people are going to have to realize, the ones that are defending him, that it's not just about the hit. There's 4 or 5 different aspects that they're going to be looking at here.
Let's take a look at the broad picture if you're a Red Blacks fan and, of course, supporter, especially in the East. Ottawa's loss to Saskatchewan dropped Paul LaPolice's head coaching record career to 19-43. Now, will a loss to Hamilton, a couple of 0-4 teams battling each other at Tim Hortons Field on Saturday, will that force the Red Blacks, Jason, to make some type of change here?
Well, we already seen one coaching change. I know we'll probably get to that later, but that wasn't a real shock to me. But it's funny how Paul LaPolice, his record as a head coach might be deceiving. What is it, 19-43, I think. So it's obviously not great. It's funny. I think Ottawa was a team that most people thought would be better to start the season. Same as Hamilton, and they just haven't got off to the starts that people expected. So it's early in the season. The one thing about the CFL, man, the BC Lions won the Grey Cup once when they started 0-5, right? And they figured it out. Now losing Masoli is going to put a huge amount of extra pressure on. But so let's say you fire the head coach Paul LaPolice. Who are you replacing him with? And is it going to be any better? Honestly, all right. So I think this injury makes their season even more challenging. Now it might unify their team. Who knows? Some weirder things have happened where you get a new rallying cry. But I would probably err on the side of not making a rash decision. 5 weeks into a CFL season, if I'm in Ottawa, that organization's being fairly patient, right? So I would be a little surprised if all of a sudden they made a coaching change.
AJ, there's all this talk. I mean, I've heard a couple of things, a couple of your people on your station talking about the sightings of Mark Trestman around town. I don't know. Does that carry any weight? Should Paul LaPolice be looking over his back?
Yeah, was he really in Ottawa? I mean, I saw somebody tweet about that. I thought it was a joke, though. So, I could be dead wrong on that. Maybe unbeknownst to me that Mark Trestman was in Ottawa, but I'm pretty sure that was just somebody joking around on Twitter. I actually seeked it out after you had mentioned it. And anyways, I kind of feel like, look, they're 0-4. I don't want to judge Paul LaPolice based on what he did a decade ago in Winnipeg, where, one of the years they made it to the Grey Cup, right? So I guess you could a little bit, but I'm just judging him by what he has done as coach of the Ottawa Redblacks. Last year, they didn't have the talent to get the job done. They finished 3-11. Now there's a lot more pressure because I think there are the excuses, right? Now you're starting quarterbacks down, but I think the 0-4 start, and especially the way they played the last couple of games, to me, first couple of games, they probably deserved a better fate, but your record is what your record is, right? And in the end, they couldn't get it done against Winnipeg, even though they're the better team in, a significant part of those two games, but they didn't turn enough yards into points and lost those two games, lost to BC, lost to Saskatchewan, both well-deserved losses. And so here they are at 0-4. Especially in light of the circumstances, now you're going with, likely Caleb Evans here this week. You got Tyree Adams, who's never even played a regular season game, that'll back him up. To say that, a loss is going to cost him his job feels that feels a little rash to me.
But can I throw this in, though? It does seem like you talked about the two really competitive games against the defending Grey Cup champions, but it does seem like this team kind of slipping a little bit in the following losses. Is that fair?
I think and look, they played two good teams, right? They haven't played a team in the East yet. They haven't played Edmonton yet. But at some point, you have to win some games, right? And you have to show that you're improving. And you're right. I think part of it is definitely injuries on defense. Like they were missing, three key guys in the secondary and a linebacker as well. And I think that showed as the game wore on against Saskatchewan. It showed to be a bit of a concern back there when you're missing Money Hunter, Patrick Levels, Frankie Griffin, and Abdul Kenna. So, but I don't want to make excuses here. They're 0-4, and they need to find a way to turn this around with or without Jeremiah Masoli. And for the next 10 to 12 weeks, it looks like without Jeremiah Masoli. So I want to give Paul LaPolice a little bit more time. I don't know if mid-season firings make a lot of sense in the Canadian Football League. I do think you've got, couple people that are capable if you decided to go in that direction within the organization, in Bob Dice and Mike Benavides, of taking over on an interim basis. But then what do you do with the offense? And we've already seen this. We saw in 2019 when Jamie Elizondo left the team late, they weren't able to get a proper coordinator to come in, and the season was a complete disaster offensively. So I'd like to give Paul LaPolice a little bit more time here to get things turned around, but it's certainly not going to be an easy task given the fact that they've lost QB1.
You know, making a change to the head coaching position during their bye week last week. And Jason, you talked about the shock that you are. I think we all were across the Canadian Football League. The Montreal Alouettes say bye-bye to Khari Jones at 1-3, 18-18, I believe, as a head coach. Did he deserve a longer leash?
Well, I actually wasn't that surprised. I thought the minute Machocha was named the GM that there was going to be a coaching change mid-season at some point if the team struggled. So I wasn't shocked by that at all. Now, I did appreciate Machocha's honesty when he said, hey, the reason the coaching change was made was he felt like the team's discipline was a major factor. Okay, so we'll see if that improves.
What does that mean? What does discipline mean? On the field or off the field?
Yeah, well, he was basically, he talked about they had the scuffle on the sidelines, and he was saying he didn't feel like the coach was able to control his players. If he tried to maybe say it more politely, but that's what he said. Now, we can debate if that's true or not, but you know what, Khari Jones, I'm a little surprised. Like, I'll say this: I don't think he'll be out of a job very long. I think he'll have a coaching opportunity. I think he won't coach this year because you know what, he's not going to get a head coaching job, and he's still getting paid by his head coach. So why would you take an OC job that's going to pay you less? So you know what, next season I think he'll be back. It's like anything. I thought it was a little early especially because you look at, AJ talked about Ottawa. Now, Ottawa is different because they have stability at the quarterback position. Montreal they didn't have stability at the most important position in the league. So if you don't have stability at QB, it's really hard to win, right? And even when you do, sometimes you don't win. But so you can change the head coach. Is their quarterback situation suddenly going to be more stable, right? Like what are they doing with Vernon Adams, right? Like that's a big question to me. So I got to see how Montreal responds here moving forward, right? It's like anything. Coaching change can be an easy decision. Is it the right decision? Time will tell. But I wasn't surprised. I just had a sense that Machocha wanted one last chance to coach in the CFL.
You feel the same way, AJ?
Yeah, well, Jason knows. I mean, I spent a lot of time in that market. I'm from Edmonton. I was there when he was last in the Canadian Football League. So as soon as he was named general manager, I knew at some point he was going to put his own stamp on things. And so not surprised at all that he's taken over for the rest of the year as head coach. Do I think it's the right decision? I think Khari Jones has done a pretty good job the last couple of seasons. I mean, I wouldn't overreact to a 1-3 start personally, based on especially
in the East.
Hey, well, let's see how it goes, right? And I mean, I don't really know. Taking this into maybe a bit of a different direction, I mean, where does the East go from here, right? I mean, you got Toronto, they're fighting on the sidelines every second week. Ottawa's 0-4, they lost their starting quarterback. Montreal, I mean, you've got pressure right from the top where, ownership has basically come out and saying, well, what would be acceptable to me? 14-4. Okay, well, I guess you only have to go 13-1 the rest of the way. And Hamilton still seems like, to me, the best bet to win the East, and they're 0-4 out of the gate, and they lost two dreadful home games, right? I mean, 21-point lead that they lost to Calgary, and then blowing it at the end against Edmonton as well. Like, I would say, if you were to ask me today, okay, who are you betting money on to win the East, I'd say the 0-4 Ticats right now. So it's wild. Two of these teams are going to be in the playoffs. I think all four teams are capable, and the one thing that we're seeing in the East-West games, all the games have been close. They just can't win the close ones, right? All these teams are finding ways to lose right now. So we'll see how it shapes out. But right now, the East, I mean, wow, it's a bit of a mess, and it's not just on the field.
One division, CFL. Hello, one division.
Well, hold on. Expand on that.
Like, why don't we have one division in the CFL? Everybody basically plays each other the exact same amount of games. It's asinine. Like, really.
Well, you know what? You know what? If they, you know what's asinine is the fact that scheduling drives me up the wall. It's the second straight year Saskatchewan doesn't come to Ottawa. So it's actually the third year in a row because they haven't been to Ottawa since 2019. Ottawa hasn't been to Calgary since 2019. Imagine, like, Saskatchewan's the best draw in the league, and you can't even get them into your stadium because of scheduling. And I get the fact, hey, you know what? You want to do unbalanced scheduling, fine. I don't love it. I don't think we need to see 10 games against Toronto, Montreal, and Hamilton, but so be it. That's what we get. You want to maybe promote rivalries, cut a little bit of cost. I don't really know how much cost you're cutting if you're chartering, whether you charter to Hamilton or BC. Okay, you save a little bit of money on gas. But, I just feel like they should probably bring that part of the equation back into it. I'll say this, and I've said this forever, and if this year, maybe this is the year that's going to change my mind. Once we see two teams from the same division in the Grey Cup game, that's where you can tell me that it's time to happen. But it hasn't happened yet. We've never seen a crossover team at number 4 come east and say, you know what, it's more beneficial for us to go east than it is to stay in the West. If that happens as the 4 seed, and maybe it happens this year, maybe this is the year, then I'll talk, then I'll listen. But in the end, I still like the traditional component of East versus West. East has to find a way to get better. I thought this was going to be the season that the East was going to be on par with the West, and it just hasn't happened that way so far. So, but beyond that, I'm not a big proponent of one division.
The crazy thing to me, I think when you do look back at this at past history, and it's no doubt the West is always the best during the regular season, but the Grey Cup games seem to tell me that it's more of an even split there, Jason, which is the strange thing to me.
Well, yeah, that's a one game, right? Like, you're going off of one game when you look at a basis of a whole regular season that has 18 games. And so it's the old adage, any game, anything can happen, right? So I understand that completely, right? And in the East for the crossover, all you can do is win. You can be, 8-9, and all you got to do is win one home game, right? Put the top team in the East on the road against the 4th team in the West and see if the results are different, right? So there's still a significant advantage when you have home field advantage. You're not traveling. You're coming off a bye. Like, everything sets up for the team that has the average or losing record to still be successful. So we would need to see it happen where you would go 1 versus 9 to make an accurate comparison over the two. And until that happens, and I understand why they're skeptical of it. I get all tradition and everything else, but tradition is tradition. At some point, you got to look to say, okay, this has been handled way too long, and it's not like you're seeing any different. So, does the benefit would be, does the 3rd place team have the choice to cross over or stay? That should be if we're going to do anything, that would be the first step, right? Like, you're giving the East the worst team of the 4 in the West. Let the 3rd place team on the road have the choice to say, you know what, I'll go East and then I'll still be on the road for 2 games, or I can go West. I would. That's when I think the conversation would be much happier to do. I don't think the league will ever do that either, but and it might be moot once they get to 5 teams, if they ever do, in the East, and they get a team in the Maritimes, and it's 5-5. And that would possibly change it. But it's frustrating when you see, like right now, and close games, whatever, they're not winning. And right now, the East, the record of the East teams is a joke compared to the West. Like Edmonton would be competitive in the East, guys. I think that says enough.
One more on this. You, AJ. Yeah, just in terms of the business angle, and I know in 2016, like, Ottawa beat Edmonton in the Snow Bowl to end up getting to the Grey Cup, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people bring that team up. In the end, they're 8-1. They sat everybody for the 18th game of the year because, strangely enough, at 8-1, they had already clinched first place in the East, right? But that team, I mean, it was such a weird season that year. They had won the net offense battle, and I get you don't win games based on net offense, but they had won net offense 16 of the 18 games that year, but they had lost 9 games in the regular season, and then they won the net offense battle in the Grey Cup against the team that won 15 games in Calgary. So that was a bit of an anomaly that year, an Ottawa team that was way better than their record, but just couldn't get out of their own way for especially late in games. But back to 2016, the business angle. That Toronto Grey Cup was in big trouble until Ottawa was in the game. And, it was perfect storm, right? Ottawa, had been out of the league for a long time, hadn't been in a Grey Cup since 1981 until 2015 when the game was in Winnipeg. All of a sudden they get back into the game. It's 4 hours away. There's 10,000 tickets still available a week before the game, and Ottawa saved the CFL's butt big time. If Edmonton wins that game, I know how passionate Edmonton fans can be, and when I say that, I know they're going through their struggles in terms of attendance right now. But I'm not sure 10,000 Edmontonians are flying the week before a game to Toronto. It's a lot easier to draw and just to have, if the game is in the East or vice versa, right? To have at least one representative there if they earn it, right? If Edmonton would have won that game, they would have earned it. It would have been an Edmonton-Calgary Grey Cup in Toronto, so be it. But there would have been a lot of empty seats. Ottawa saved the CFL's butt that year. And that's another reason why I think East versus West matters when it comes to the Grey Cup game.
Well, I will say this. If it was Edmonton, Calgary in the Grey Cup, a Battle of Alberta you'd never seen, there would have been not only Edmonton fans traveling, more Calgary fans would have traveled just because they would have wanted the opportunity to see them beat their rival because they never met in the Grey Cup. So I think it's still, that would have been, now if it was Calgary, BC, maybe not the same, but it would have been Calgary, Edmonton. That would have been, just like if you ever have, if Toronto and Hamilton ever played in the Grey Cup, in Saskatchewan or in Edmonton, I think you'd have a lot of fans traveling because it's something they've never seen.
Wow. Guys, Elks quarterback Trey Ford, he suffers a significant, what we're calling a collarbone injury, could be sidelined for multiple weeks. Looked like the future was now when it comes to this kid. Khari Jones is named, Taylor Cornelius the starter. You got Nick Arbuckle there. Kyle Loxley appears to be kind of the gadget guy. Does a deal need to be made, or is that just going to play itself out, Jason?
Well, it's funny. Taylor Cornelius, the guy's got a cannon of an arm. He actually looked pretty good down the stretch last year. He didn't. It was almost like they decided, okay, we're going to go with Arbuckle, even though clearly the coaching staff doesn't have a ton of faith in him. And then they went with Trey Ford, and I understand, right? That Trey Ford's a very intriguing athlete to look at, but. You know what, Cornelius right now, the trade that might happen is, we were talking about Montreal earlier, where they eventually say, hey, you know what, you guys don't like Arbuckle, we're not really sold on Vernon Adams, although they might be. I'd still be a little surprised if he didn't get another shot, but that's the only trade that's realistic. I don't see any other trade that's going to possibly help Edmonton. And so, Cornelius at least was here last year. The guy can throw the ball. See, there's no question about that. He doesn't have the athleticism of Ford. I'm not sure any quarterback in the league does, but that's who they'll go with. Edmonton's they were a bad team last year, and they revamped a lot of their players. It's rare in the CFL that you can just turn things around quickly from going from a bottom feeder. I know a lot of people were high on Jones, but he didn't turn it around instantly in Saskatchewan either because it's really hard to do. So you're bringing in guys on the defense that you want to play his style of defense. He's very direct in how he plays defense. And you know what? It worked. They've had one good defensive game really against Hamilton. The rest hasn't been great defensively. So they got a lot of holes there. And, offensively, Nick Arbuckle, when he's in, guys, he's just an interception machine. Right, he's got 8 picks already this year, just way too many. So I get why they're going with Taylor Cornelius, but is it going to solve the Elks got a lot of holes to fill, and I don't know if the quarterback can stop all of them. He only has 2, unless he's doing 10 fingers in the boat and he's plugging every hole all at once. I don't see right now how it's ultimately going to make that much of a difference.
AJ.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jason. I think this is a long-term proposition here when it comes to Khari Jones and this group. It's not like Ottawa, for example, where, you came off back-to-back 3-win seasons and this fan base had hoped that they were going to turn it around and make the playoffs right away. In Edmonton, I think everyone kind of knew that this was going to be a rebuild for the long haul, kind of maybe like what BC did last year, bring in some new faces, have them get acclimatized to the league and hopefully compete for a playoff spot or more next year. So, I think look, if the price is right on Vernon Adams Jr., it would seem to make a lot of sense for both sides. If Montreal is going to go with Trevor Harris, to have someone making, starters money doesn't really make a lot of sense from a Montreal standpoint, to have Vernon Adams Jr. sitting there when you can move him to a team that could use him. But it has to make sense for Edmonton as well, right? I mean, I don't know if you want to be giving up your first-round pick when it's going to be, probably first or second overall this year, right? So we'll wait and see what happens. But in the end, I do think this Edmonton team with Khari Jones, the things that you see with Khari Jones teams, they get better over the course of the season, especially on defense. And I think this team's going to be probably a tough out come the second half of the season. But, right now, they obviously still have a lot of holes to fill, and quarterback play is one of them.
They're just trying to get a home win, guys. It's been over 1,000 days since they've won a game at home, and
wow.
You think about it, they had Saskatchewan in for the home opener. They've had Calgary, and the fan base in Edmonton right now. This is a real organizational on-field issue, but off-field. Victor Cui has a tough job to bring back some excitement to that, and it always helps when your team's winning. Make no mistake about it. There's very few fan bases that consistently are going to be like, "Whoo, this team's losing. Awesome, let's keep going." They've done some things. If you're 12 and under, kids get in free to games the rest of the season, but they've got to build a winning culture, and they've got to repair a lot of things to fans in Edmonton, and I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. They're going to have to be very patient. If they try to chase a quick fix, I think they'll just be chasing their tail.
But Jason, on that point there, the Oilers had, just tremendous, lengthy years of just nonsense, quite honestly, and changing coaches and general managers, yet they seem to have revived that sort of interest in sort of the city of champions. Is that possible in Edmonton right now?
Well, hockey and football are very different, of course. I think the Elks has been a long, gradual decrease of their fan base, right? It was one where I think they try to turn a blind eye to it. They were always, we got an older fan base, and that's okay. And lots of things that they did with their old broadcast partner, limiting other people from advertising in the stadium, was just archaic thinking. And I think it's multiple. We're talking decades of thinking, hey, our fan base is loyal and good, and watching it age out, and really they haven't done enough. I'm not saying they were completely oblivious to it, the previous regimes, but I'm not sure they went about it the right way. And so now it's, Victor Cui at least seems to have a plan, and it's one that's not going to be quick. You to win back fans or to gain interest from new fans isn't just something that happens overnight, right? Hockey's a little bit different. It's a passionate, even look at Saskatchewan, which is a football bed. People forget, for many years in the 80s and 90s, the Riders, they almost died, they were dead in the water, and football is their basis. That's everything. You're more football first than hockey there, and even they went through bad times. So I think this is going to be one where it's going to be a long haul. Now, the Elks got a lot of money in the coffers from over the years, so that's maybe their one benefit, that they can absorb a little bit of losses. But ultimately, you got to win games eventually, right? You can do all the right things and have all these great promotions, and you'll get people to come to one game. But when the team loses and gets spanked every game, they're like, well, that wasn't really fun. It's always more fun for a new fan or a fan coming back again after years away to see wins than losses. And when you haven't, and I know that I understand there was a year without football, right? So I know the 1,000 days is a little bit skewed because of it, but it doesn't change the fact that they haven't won a game since August of 19 at home. And guess what? Their next home game is, guys, against the two-time defending champion Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I don't think they're getting a win in their next home game either.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, a couple of things. I see it here, right? Ottawa's lost 16 of their last 18 home games. So I know exactly what the feeling is. And you wouldn't believe how many people come up to me and talk to me and say, you know what? And especially because they've been so bad offensively. Last year, they were one of 6 teams all time in Canadian football history that wasn't able to average one offensive touchdown a game. They had 13 in their 14 games, right? And people would just come up to me and say, I just want to see some touchdowns. Yes. I just want to see them be competitive, right? So
it's that bad.
Yeah, it's hard when you don't win at home. And this team, since like 2016, even they won 2 games at home. They were actually really good on the road the year they won the Grey Cup. They won 2 games at home that year. So 2017, they were bad at home again. 2019, and so I know how it is, and I know how that can hurt a fan base, and you can do everything else right. But if you don't win at home, if you're not competitive at home, it really hurts. And look, I've lived in Edmonton 27 years. Jason and I are similar age. We grew up around the same time. Like, Jason can remember the 80s, like me, when the Edmonton Eskimos, as they were named back then, and the Edmonton Oilers, they were both dynasties, and the Eskimos then were as big as the Oilers. And you had one of the best teams in the history of the NHL. Playing at the same time, and you'd go to CFL games, there would still be 45, 50,000 people there. And so it's eroded over time. It's a little unfortunate. A lot of my friends that I grew up going to CFL games with, I hear from them over text, and they're crapping on the league, and they make trips to go to Seattle and Vegas and Phoenix and all over the United States to watch NFL games now. So, like, there's a real concern in terms of, I've been watching Alberta for a while here. Like, everyone's kind of saying around the league, oh, the Prairie Heartland, everything's fine, right? And maybe everything's fine in Saskatchewan and to a certain degree in Winnipeg. But I've been watching those crowds dwindle for a long time in both Edmonton and Calgary. And it concerns me. They've got the league's got a lot of work to do. You're seeing some positive things like Vancouver, for example, with new ownership, but even still, right? 17,000 this week, which is, better than it would have been a couple of years ago, but it just goes to show, I think every team in the Canadian Football League, Ottawa included, has a lot of work to do to continue to attract fans.
Guys, the CFL's last 2 undefeated teams square off Friday night at IG Field. Boy, this is going to be a good one. The Stampeders coming off the bye week. The Bombers with yet another impressive victory going into BC when there was a lot of hype. And I believe when you're one of those Vegas guys and you like to put a little money down, it sounded to me that BC were the favorite in that game, which I thought was a little disrespectful to the 2-time Grey Cup champions. But, Jason, who wins this game? This is, I guess, the game of the week coming up.
Oh, yeah, the Bombers Lions game was a fantastic game too, right? I thought it lived up to all the hype, and which was great to see. You don't see it very often. Calgary's looked really good, man. Bo Levi Mitchell's healthy again, and obviously he's still a pretty good quarterback. It's hard to go against the champs, though, man. Like it just is. Winnipeg is a great example of why continuity matters. And culture in sports still matters. Some people like to scoff at that word, and they took some lumps early, right? I remember there was a few years ago, people were screaming, Mike O'Shea should get fired, Mike O'Shea should get fired. And the easy choice sometimes is to fire a coach, right? Because it's the easy choice. Rather than look and say, hey, you know what? We got to gut this out, and we got to have a plan. We got to stick to the plan, even when the plan sometimes looks like you got one side of your car in the ditch. You got to still stay on the path. And Winnipeg's done that, and they've been rewarded now because other organizations, like the Bombers, go into every game. They believe they can win. They got a lot of talent all over the field. Like, they lose Lawler, and they don't even miss him in the receiving corps at all, right? Because it shows you one guy can be replaceable. And so it's hard for me to pick against the Bombers. They just look so good. Like, they had those 2 games against Ottawa. They know how to win games, right? Like, if you want to play a low-scoring, tight game, they'll beat you. You want to play high-scoring, they can go after you. So I'll still take the Bombers until someone can beat them.
AJ, anyway, you can see the Calgary Stampeders pulling this one off on the road.
I mean, I can, but I'm not picking against Winnipeg. That's for sure. Write them off at your own peril, right? And, I was a little surprised to see so many people picking BC this week. And BC probably looked more impressive than Winnipeg over the start of the season, no doubt. But until the champs lose a game, they're still the champs. And that's a team that just knows how to win football games. They can grind out games in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's just ridiculous what they've done, especially defensively in fourth quarters where they just barely give up any points. So when it comes to crunch time, they find a way to grind out wins. I'll say this. I'm very happy for Bo Levi Mitchell. and the league, right? I mean, he is still the face of the Canadian Football League. You've got some other, up-and-coming stars, like a Nathan Rourke, for example, in BC, but, we've kind of graduated from Henry Burris and Ricky Ray and Mike Riley and some of the other faces of the league over the course of the last decade, and Bo is the guy that's left. And maybe that's disrespectful to a guy like Zach Collaros, for example, who's won back-to-back Grey Cups, but Bo is still the guy. And to see him healthy and slinging it, I think it's fantastic for him and fantastic for the league. But, I'm not picking against Winnipeg until they find a way to lose. And right now, they just seem to keep getting better and better with each and every week.
Jason, that's a great point that you throw out there, AJ. I thought in hearing some pre-game and actually pre-season conversations, it seemed to me that Bo Levi Mitchell had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. Like he was upset at people for counting him out. And I know you're calling him over, Zach Collaros if he were starting the team. And that Zach's got quite a record as a member of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But yeah, it did seem to me that Bo Levi said, you just wait, the best that may yet to be coming.
Well, yeah, I think, he's a proud player, but it was fair to wonder, and the questions weren't, does Bo Levi Mitchell have the talent to do it? The questions were, can he stay healthy to do it? I think that was more the question. I don't recall anybody saying, oh, Bo Levi Mitchell, he's not good anymore. It's, can Bo Levi Mitchell be healthy, right? Because a lot of
people fell in love with Jake Mayer.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, a lot of people fell in love with Nick Arbuckle too, and the biggest mistake you can make is to get too enamored with the quarterback, especially in Calgary, where you can be an average quarterback and their system offensively makes you look good. Now, I think it made some people take Bo Levi Mitchell for granted, but all you got to do is look at what happens when you leave Calgary. Right? How many quarterbacks are having the same success that they had there, right? During the Bo Levi Mitchell time. So, I think, Mayer, Mitchell, one of them, I don't think they're both going to be in Calgary next year, right? One of them's probably going to move on. And if I was Calgary and Bo Levi Mitchell's healthy, I'm not moving on from him. Like, why would I? So I think that, Bo, good for him to have a chip on his shoulder. But it was more so not the chip on his shoulder. It was probably the chips in his shoulder that were the concern, whether or not, he was going to be able to be healthy. Because when he's healthy, he's clearly one of the best still in the league.
AJ, it looks like that running game for Calgary, too, really is helping out Bo Levi. That Kadeem Carey really seems to be able to what I like about his style is that when he hits the hole, it's quick and it's fast. And having that running game is going to help any quarterback, I would presume. No
doubt. He's a fun player to watch and certainly one of the best, especially with William Stanback out right now, right? Which is, and that's concerning for the league when you've got, good quarterbacks like Masoli, good star players like Stanback that are injured, early in the season, but definitely one of the prime running backs in the league right now. But that Winnipeg defense, I mean, they're so with, what they've got on the D-line in the trenches and then Adam Big Hill in the middle. Tough to run the ball against them. So it should be a great battle. Looking forward to it. These are the types of matchups that, you set your calendar to and say, okay, I don't want to be missing this one for sure.
Jason, this Willie Jefferson, you can, it's Cameron Wake is a guy that comes to mind to me that, like, it seems like every single game he's making an impact play. It is unbelievable to me how at times he can just totally seemingly dominate a game.
Well, I still think he's probably the best defensive player overall in the league. And he's a physical forward, like different than Wake is just so how long and lanky he is. Now Wake was a different player because he was so explosive off the edge, and then he even went to the NFL and he remained a dominant player for a long time. But Willie Jefferson's you look at certain guys, and I know there was lots of talk, and there's another player who opted to stay in the program, right? And I wonder if Lawler's like, yeah, man, you know what, I'm getting more money, but because winning's more fun. Right? Like, winning's more fun. But Willie Jefferson right now, what? How do you defend him? Right? And that's the thing. Even when he commands double teams, so even if he's not making the play by him commanding the double team, well, now he's making it easier for his teammates. And that's the advantage of having a dominant defensive lineman. because eventually he's going to get one-on-one matchups, and so usually he'll win those. And then on the other time, when he commands a double team all the time, if you've got other competent guys in your D-line, well, now they're going to take advantage of it. So it's a huge advantage to have a guy like that, on your team. Like Armando Sewell was that for Edmonton for a long time. Now, he didn't have the sack ability, I think the overall athleticism, but his strength was he commanded it inside, and he could cause so much ruckus on his own that it makes everybody else, look better. And, to game plan Willie Jefferson, I'm telling you, for offensive coordinators, specifically O-line coaches, and I think it's probably got a complete team effort, like, it's a challenge right now because he's one guy that you almost have to try to game plan against individually to keep him from impacting the game. And those guys are rare. There's not many guys that you have to say, we have to game plan to try to eliminate him or at least contain him defensively.
AJ reminds me, and I think we're all kind of in the same age group here, and this guy won a number of Super Bowls going to the National Football League with the 49ers and Cowboys. Does he remind you of Charles Haley to me?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting comparison for sure. So, I mean, he's just part of the thing with Willie Jefferson is just at 6'7", right? He causes so many issues that, if he was 6'2", 6'3", that he wouldn't, where he, sometimes he just has, it's not even about getting to the quarterback. Sometimes he gets his big mitts up there and boom, knocks down passes. And so it affects the game in so many ways. It's kind of like a rim protector in basketball where all of a sudden, okay, he swats a couple away and it changes how you have to do things. So yeah, he just beats you in so many ways. And then especially when Jeff Goat's playing on the other side too, it's pick your poison, right? Because that's a guy that is lethal as well. I mean, they've got two of the best pass rushers in the league when they're healthy and going at it together. So it's a nice luxury for them to have. It's funny. That's why, like, you see the first two games for Ottawa and you see basically how they were able to handle things in the trenches. They were able to move the ball. Like, they got 825 yards net offense the first two games against Winnipeg, against that front, against Big Hill, against, so definitely some losses in the secondary, but that's why, for me, it was such a bright start to the season for Ottawa, seeing just how well they played, even though they weren't able to get a win. And funny how things turn, right? You get some injuries, you lose your starting quarterback, you start to maybe lose a little bit of confidence, and now all of a sudden, here they are at 0-4. But, I digress. Winnipeg, even though it took them a while to kind of get looking, and maybe not too long, but I mean, here we are four games into the season, and for them 5, and they're back looking to exactly how we expected them to look coming off the end of last season, which is good for the league, right? I think it's good to have a team where everyone says, okay, you know what? That's a team we want to go and pay money to see that team coming in, because this is what really good football looks like, and it's a measuring stick game for everyone that plays Winnipeg. So always good when you've got a team like that, like Tampa Bay in hockey the last few years, like with Golden State in basketball, that people want to pay to watch, that people want to turn their television on to watch, because they are a legit dynasty potential in terms of what the Bombers can bring. They can absolutely win a third straight Grey Cup this year, which would be incredible. We haven't seen that in the league since, of course, Edmonton from 78 to 82.
AJ, all is not lost, as Jason would attest. As Tiger Cat fans, and here on the Tiger Cats Audio Network, we're facing a rookie quarterback in Trey Ford, and we lost a football game. So all may not be lost when you guys come into Hamilton this week. Guys, just prime time performance by both of you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Tiger Cats Audio Network and the CFL this week. Fantastic opinions, fantastic takes, and we certainly hope that we can count on talking to you guys sometime a little bit later in the season. Thanks so much there, Jason. Thanks so much there, AJ. Folks, this has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. A reminder, you can catch us on all your favorite podcast catchers anywhere, Apple, Play, Spotify, you know where to catch us. And again, if you like to see us visually, which, that's a questionable thing for at least your host here, catch us on YouTube. And we remind you to like and subscribe. This has been the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. We hope to see you next week, next Monday, on the Ticats Audio Network.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.